Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be our last and final presidential election prediction of the month of October. We'll do one other in November, but this is for this month. This is obviously a very, very close election. It's going to be the closest one, closer than 2020, especially when you look at the national polling. It's going one way versus the electoral college. It could go the other way like it did in 2016, and so it's going to be very tumultuous. I don't think we're going to get our results on election day itself. I think it's going to be more so like election week. Overall, know that these are subject to change. These could change in my November prediction right before November 5th. And so this is all very up in the air, and some of the states could go one way or another, which could drastically impact the electoral college. So just keep that in mind. And then additionally, to give you an idea, because I've already filled out most of the swing states, is that my ratings are safe/solid or is 15% and above, likely is 5 to 15, and lean is 1 to 5, and tilt is less than 1. Jumping right into things, the states I've already filled out are the solid states. No matter who the candidate is, California is going to be voting for the Democrat, North Dakota is going to be voting for the Republican. Same with the rest of these states. It's expected for them to vote one way or another. So talking about the rest of the states, let's jump in with Colorado. So in 2020, Biden won the state by around 13-14%, but this year I think Harris could actually win it by more. So Colorado is one of the fastest trending Democratic states in the country, with populations in their states rising because of more tech going into the areas and other reasons as well. So I think that puts them in the solid category for now. And then the partner state to them that is usually paired together in a lot of these ratings and predictions is New Mexico to their south. They usually vote more conservative to the right of Colorado, so I don't see them being as likely or as safe as Colorado is, more so likely, which coincides with their 2020 election results, which was about an 11% margin. I don't think it's going to go much higher. It could possibly even go less. So that puts them in the likely category for Harris Walz. And then I want to jump over to Iowa and Ohio. Those two are going to be likely Republican states. They voted both in about an 8-point margin or so, more so than I would expect for Iowa, honestly. And so I think that's going to be similar, if not even more, for Trump fans, but still in the likely category. Next, let's talk about Alaska. So Alaska voted in about a 10-point margin for Trump in 2020, but recently in 2022, in different special elections, we've seen Alaska move further and further to the left. I think that right now they're still going to be in the likely Republican category, but in future election cycles, with the Democrats in Alaska gaining more and more momentum, we could see Alaska become a swing state, which isn't that imperative still because they only have 3 electoral votes, but still it's going to be important in extremely close elections like this one. But again, not this election cycle, maybe further ones down the line. So next on to Texas. Texas was seen as kind of a swing state for a while, especially in 2008 or 2012, still went to the Republicans, has gone to the Republicans for a very long time, as we can see here. So I don't see it flipping over anytime soon. Some Democrats have gotten excited about it recently because of the Senate race there. Ted Cruz is running against his Democratic opponent, and he's doing pretty bad for an incumbent who's been in the Senate for as long as he has. He's only winning by about a 3-point margin. But people that are excited about this race in the hopes of the Democratic candidate are neglecting to look at the presidential rating. So that's about a +7 rating for Texas. So I don't think that's going to be going to the left anytime soon on the presidential front, maybe in the Senate, but that more so shows an unsatisfaction by the constituents of Texas for their senators or for the Senate in general than for an overall presidential candidate. So I think that Texas is going to be likely red. Now, Florida. Florida is a really interesting case, of course, really on the minds of everyone. So Florida in 2021 was won by Trump by about 4%, but this year I definitely think it's going to be more, which puts it into the likely category. In 2022 in the midterms, we saw Democrats like the governor, Ron DeSantis, and Rick Scott, one of the senators, win their re-elections by astounding numbers, 20-30 points, which was insane for a state like Florida. And so it's gone out of the reach for Democrats at this point, and I think it's much more in the territory of Republicans. If we look historically, Obama won it in both 2008 and 2012. I don't think that they're going to be able to win it back until they really develop the Florida Democratic Party. Next is South Carolina. I think Trump won the state by about 12% in 2020. Again, I think that similar thing is going to happen this year, making it a likely state. Going up, skipping North Carolina, of course, a very interesting swing state, we're going to go to Virginia. So in 2020, Biden won the state by about 10% as well, but I think that this year there could be more of a Republican advantage in Virginia. We saw that before Biden dropped out of the race, but after his debate, Virginia was one of the swing states that was on everyone's mind, that if Virginia was going to be considered a swing state, then Biden really needed to drop out of the race. And so I think even with Harris replacing Biden, there's still some hesitancy with Democrats or independents in Virginia that could make it more of a, not a likely or a safe state, but a likely state. While we're moving up, let's go to New Hampshire, which Biden won by about 7% in 2020. Similar things this year. I don't think it's going to change all that much, likely for that. And then Maine's 2nd district, it's pretty much going to go red. I'm expecting it to. And then Nebraska's 2nd district. I think this is going to be a much more competitive race. I think that's probably in the lean category, honestly, which is concerning for Democrats. I think they should really get a better hold on Nebraska's 2nd district because, again, this race is going to be extremely tight. 1 or 2 different electoral votes could really be the shift in this election. And then last but not least, before we get to the major swing states, Minnesota. So Minnesota is obviously the home state of Tim Walz, the vice presidential pick for Harris, and Biden won it by about 7% in 2020, and I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon. I don't think it's going to become a lean or tilt state at all, but I also don't think it's going to go into safe category just because Walz is on the ticket. If anything, we've seen polling go in the negative direction since Walz joined the campaign, ironically. So still in the likely category. So now we are on to our final 7 swing states, which have been the talk of the town in the world of politics since for the last few months or so, and even in 2020, these were the main swing states as well. North Carolina kind of got added in this presidential election cycle, but still pretty much the same players. Now for this, I kind of want to move into the section of the states that I'm most sure about to the ones I'm most unsure about. Now, a general thing that I want to talk about with polling is that the polls have drastically underestimated Republicans in recent cycles, and not even just Republicans, but Donald Trump in specific. So this article from the New York Times is from October 17th, so about a week ago or so, or about like a week and a half ago, so not as recent, but it doesn't really matter, honestly, since this is just like national polling results from previous election cycles. So in 2020, we saw that the polls were extremely misleading. They showed Democrats winning by about like a 7% average when it really was just a 4-point. And then in 2016 as well, about like 3 to 4, or 4 to 3 rather. And so the polls aren't that accurate versus before we saw that it changed every year, basically from Democrat to Republican, Republican, Democrat, Republican. It moved around a lot, the group being underestimated. But since 2016, since Trump has been on the ballot specifically, have Republicans been underestimated? I think it's mostly because Trump really brings out the low propensity voters that aren't going to show up in polling or not going to answer calls and are really underrepresented in a lot of these reports, but are still going to show up on election day because of how much they're passionate about Trump as an individual and as a political character. In 2022, the polls were a record level of accuracy that we've seen, but Trump wasn't on the ballot in 2022, and so that changes the entire game. So keeping that in mind, that Trump brings out the low propensity voters, that in 2020 he was largely underestimated, or rather Biden was largely overestimated, I think that we can expect something similar this year, honestly. We saw in 2020 that Michigan was expected to be won by 6 points by Biden when he only won it by around 3. In Wisconsin, he was expected to win it by 3 points. He only won it by less than 1. Same thing for Pennsylvania. With that being said, I think that's going to be a lean. It's going to be very close in Arizona, but not as close as it was in 2020. If we look at the RCP average, it shows Trump up 1.5, which would put it in the lean territory. It's one of the most solid Republican states by the RCP average, with Georgia second in line. Speaking of which, let's move over to Georgia. Again, I think that's additionally going to be a lean Republican state. Now, if we look at the electoral count at this point, Trump is up 20 to Harris is 226. He's up at 246. And so it really matters where the remaining states go. North Carolina, I think that's also going to go to Trump, another additional 16 points. Now, between lean and tilt, I think it is going to go lean just because we haven't really seen it go to a Democrat in a while. In 2020, Biden won it by about like 1, or Trump won it by 1.2, and I think that it's not going to be trending Democrat, especially with Harris. She's not as strong of a candidate as I think Biden was in 2020. She's not going to bring out those voters. We know that she's had massive problems with black voters, especially black men. I don't think that she's going to have that same type of support this time around. Also, James Clyburn, one of the leading, or the leading Democratic African American in Congress. He was one of the major reasons why Biden even got the nomination in 2020 and why he was almost able to smidge by a victory in North Carolina, but Harris hasn't gotten that type of full-fledged support by Jim Clyburn. It hasn't had that much of a effect as it did for Biden in 2020. Now, before we go over to the blue wall, which I think is going to be the most crucial 3 states, let's go over to Nevada. Now, I'm extremely split on Nevada. I would say that is going to be a tilt Democrat state, but I've been really hesitant about this. So when we look at the New York Times, again, I don't know how accurate their polling is going to be this time around. They have Nevada up less than 1% for Harris. When you look at 538, we say that it's even, but they also have all of the blue wall even as well. And in the RCP average, we see it up 0.7%, which is more like when we look at the polling than is most of the blue wall states, right? Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are all up less than Nevada. So those are going to be more competitive than Nevada is. Nevada is more secure for Trump. But then when we look at Nate Silver's bulletin here, we see that he also casts Nevada as an even state, while he says that the blue wall states are more teetering toward Trump. So we see them to the right versus on the RCP average, we see them to the left. So it's very confusing. I think Nevada is going to be an extremely interesting case, but overall it's not going to decide the election because it doesn't have as many electoral votes, so I'm not as sure about it. But I do think that's going to be extremely tilt red state. I could see it going either way. I think that Nevada is going to be chosen by just a few 10,000s of votes either way. But again, not important in the general election when we're looking at electoral votes, unless Harris is able to win, like replace one of the blue wall states with, say, North Carolina or Georgia, though that's probably not going to happen either. So now on to the final 3. I feel like we're in the Hunger Games. We're just leveling down the amount of players in this race. So Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the 3 states that are going to make or break this election. Firstly, on Wisconsin. So Wisconsin is a more Republican voter base in general. They have less college-educated white people. They have more suburban white people in general. And so obviously the electorate goes more to the Republican front. But in 2020, Biden won it by about like 0.6 or 8%, as we can see here. Oh yeah, 0.6. And so we don't know if Kamala Harris is going to have that same level of support this time around, or if it's going to lean more towards the right. All the polling seems to be showing to the right, except again for the New York Times, which again shows Harris up winning, but I don't think that their polling is as accurate this time around. Overall, I'm a big fan of their polling, but this time I think it's a bit misleading. The 538 as well shows it even. It's not at all clear. Wisconsin on the RCP average up 0.2, and then Nate Silver shows it here as Harris winning it by 0.5. So his rating, Nate Silver, I hold is one of the best poll analysts and pollsters in the country. So he has Harris winning this slightly, but I'm not so sure. When we look at historically, Wisconsin has mostly gone to Democrats and only went to Trump in 2016 after a long run of going to the Democrats since 1984. But then this time around, I'm not so sure how likely they are to go for Kamala Harris. With all that being said, I also think that they are the most likely out of these 3 states to go to the Republicans, just because of demographics-wise. So I think that Wisconsin is going to go throughout this election cycle, but only slightly tilt red. And again, it's an extremely crucial swing state, again, decided by a few 10,000 votes, maybe a few thousand votes, who knows. But I am going to cast Wisconsin as a tilt red state. Now, if you see this, you can see that Trump has already won in the Electoral College. He has passed the 270 mark. Just him winning the rest of these 4 swing states with one of the blue wall states gives him the victory. So it doesn't really matter where we go from here. If he wins any of these, he's going to win. But just for the sake of filling out this map and also setting my predictions, let's go for it. So Michigan, I think is going to go tilt blue. But again, I think that there's a large case and a very respected case, I think, that could be made to say that would go tilt red in this case. The only reason why I'm saying that it's tilt blue is that they have a very large, more diverse, more urban population than does, say, Wisconsin. They also have more college-educated white people, but then they also have a very large Arab American community that's larger than any other state in the nation, which has been kind of a problem for the Biden-Harris administration, especially, and then Harris's campaign as well. She's had a few public tiffs with protesters during her rallies and whatnot that I think could give her some trouble. Also, many Arab American leaders haven't officially endorsed any one of the candidates, and we know that in the primaries in March, about 300,000 Arab Americans said that they were non-committed on their ballots for the presidential primaries for the Democrats. So they weren't supportive of the Biden-Harris administration then. I don't think they're going to lean over now, but just because of other demographics in the state, I think that's going to be slightly, only tilt blue. And then that also kind of mirrors what the rest of the pollsters are saying. Again, Michigan less than 1, Michigan even here, and then top battlegrounds, it's 1, just up 0.2, which is the smallest margin, with Wisconsin as well. And then in Nate Silver's average as well, Harris wins it only slightly. Also, it's interesting to note that all of these states have moved towards the Republican Donald Trump within the last month, which shows a huge failure in Kamala Harris's campaign to not be able to grasp on to the honeymoon or the bump from the convention, and only being able to have it for a short bit of time before the American people really got to know her policies or lack thereof, and weren't happy with what they're seeing. So I think that their campaign was really poorly run, very similar to Kamala Harris's 2019 and 2020 campaign. And so I think that it's a lesson to be learned for future American campaigns. Not to say that she can't win, because it's extremely tight, as I've been saying throughout this video. It's going to be decided by just a few 100,000 votes, probably nationwide, but still, I think that Kamala Harris's campaign could have been better in a lot of ways, and they lost out on a lot of groups, including Black men, Latino men, a lot of different groups that I think are going to probably cost them this election. And last but not least, Pennsylvania. So I think Pennsylvania really could have easily been won by Harris if she had picked Josh Shapiro, who is the governor of Pennsylvania, as her vice presidential pick. I think that would have solidified at least one of the 3 blue wall states for her, but unfortunately didn't pick him for her sake. So I don't think that's going to be as easy for her. Now, this is the hardest of any state, I think, in my opinion, to rate. I've been having a lot of difficulty in going one way or another with Pennsylvania, specifically more so than even Nevada or Wisconsin, Michigan. Looking at the polling just briefly, Harris less than 1 on the national polling, even. But if we just look at it more specifically, we see that Trump is up 0.4 in their average. Harris was up just about 2 weeks ago, but now the momentum has shifted over to Trump. On the RCP average, Trump is up 0.6, and in Nate Silver's bulletin, he shows Trump up by 0.3, which is a change not only from last month, but within the last week. Versus Michigan, we saw in the last week lean over to Democrats, their momentum, Wisconsin, Democrats, Georgia slightly for Democrats, New Mexico for Democrats, but already we know that Democrats are going to win that as a likely state. So with all that being said, I think that Pennsylvania is going to be a tilt Republican state. So we already knew this, but just looking at this one more time, Donald Trump, I think, is going to win this election by the Electoral College. I think that it's also clear in the way that he and his team are presenting himself. They seem to be much more easy on the campaign. Also with the October surprises and the increase in the severity of the rhetoric that Kamala Harris and her supporters are using with Hitler and fascism and all these things, I think it's a clear sign that they also know that they're in for trouble in this election cycle. And it's not going to go their way, probably, is just my opinion, obviously, based on these ratings, based on the polls, and based on everything that I've seen, have personally uncovered during this election cycle, I guess. So thank you for watching. Please let me know if you disagree with any of these ratings. And again, this is going to be a close election. If I'm wrong, I will not be surprised if I'm wrong about the election overall. I will be kind of surprised, but if I'm wrong about like 1 or 2 states flipping another way, one way or another, I won't be too surprised. But overall, I think that this going into this election about a month ago, I was not sure whatsoever about the result, but now I am more certain that Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States of America. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.